My name is Joe. I'll be leading the panel. My pronouns are they, them. And just to audio describe myself, I'm a white person with brown shoulder-length hair, blue glasses, and wearing black jeans and a yellow jumper. I am a disabled and neurodivergent artist and producer, accessibility consultant, and I'm the digital producer for DaDa, which is a Liverpool-based disability arts organization. This year we celebrate our 40th birthday, and we have been at the forefront of disability rights and disability art for the past 4 decades in the UK. We are hosting this panel in collaboration with the Immersive Experience Network to chat about accessibility, something which we all know can always be more. There can always be more access within everything, life, but particularly the bits of life that we are in creative control of, like these sorts of immersive experiences, we are making decisions to not make them accessible. So we're going to chat a little bit about how we might be able to make those accessible. What are the pitfalls? How can we avoid that? And as a panel, we'll also be able to take lots of questions from the audience. Just before we introduce the rest of our lovely panelists, this is a very relaxed and comfortable space, so feel free to make yourselves as comfortable as you can. You're also very much free to go and come as you leave. That's not the right sentence, is it? To come and go as you please. There we go. That's better. That's what I meant. Feel free to come and go as you please. Spread out. Make yourself comfortable, however you want to or are able to. Right. Let's introduce the rest of our panelists. Tom, I'll hand over to you.
Hey, I'm Thomas Florence, artistic director of But Why, magic consultant, writer, weird, immersive creator, human, and neurodiverse myself. Yeah, I'm wearing, is it green? Greeny bluey beanie, graffiti jacket that I think makes me look cool, but your opinion may vary. Yeah, and I'm working with Joe right now with DaDaFest. I'm trying to build an accessible alternative reality game, or ARG. Earlier I was chatting to someone and I said alternative reality game. Like, what's that? And then I was like, oh, the ARGs are, and they're like, oh, I know what an ARG is. And I was like, that's the equivalent of someone being like, do you want a bacon, lettuce, tomato? And I'd be like, no, go, oh, I'll get a BLT. I know what a BLT is. There you go. So that's why, to be accessible, I've said both alternative reality game and the word ARG to cover both my bases there.
Laura?
Hi, yeah, I'm Laura Wilkinson. I'm a producer for Ben Fredericks Collaborations. My pronouns are she, her. I would describe myself as a white female with long dark hair. I'm wearing quite a retro blue dress, and I'm quite happy because my lanyard matches it. We're mainly going to be here talking today about Choosing Children, which is an immersive theatre show we produced last year, did a tour in the Midlands, where we incorporated access in the form of British Sign Language, audio description and captioning for every single audience member that came to the show. But more on that later.
And over to you, Ben.
Yeah, Ben Fredericks. I'm artist director at Ben Fredericks Collaborations, an artist myself. I describe myself as glasses wearing, bold with whitish complexion. I think that's me.
Fair enough, lovely. Yeah, so I like to run a panel. I've seen a few panels today already, and they've been quite structured in a sort of a, we're all going to talk, and then we're going to get questions. But I do want this to feel a little, I mean, I know we're on tall chairs and on stage, but I would love if this could feel like a bit more of a conversation. So if people do want to chime in or comment or put your hand up or however you want to kind of get involved, I would love this to be more interactive. And don't feel like you need to save questions to the end, especially if you have something to ask or something to say about what we are talking about on stage. But to begin with, I'm going to ask everybody to tell us about, I think we've invited everyone on here to talk because they have at least one particular experience where they are currently or in the past have tried to build as much access as possible into it. And I think those are really good use cases for us to look at, because often we can be told that, oh, well, let's just do one thing, or let's see what we can afford later. And I think it's really lovely to be able to see projects and immersive interactive projects that are actively trying to cater to as many people as possible and to not put hurdles up in front of people. I think everything we're talking about today is going to be within, in line with the social model of disability. I'm sure I'm seeing some nods in the audience. I'm sure that we all might know what that is, but just to cover our bases, or anyone here who is, I guess, investigating the idea of access for the first time, the social model of disability states that it is not an internal quality of ourselves which disables us, it is the way in which society fails to cater to us and our abilities. Not having ramps built into architecture or is disabling, not because we are not catering to people. And we know this is the case. If you look at traffic lights, the green in a traffic light has a little bit of blue in it. So if people are red-green colorblind, they can still discern between the traffic lights at the same rate necessary to drive. We have stopped colorblind people from being disabled from driving by making an adjustment in the way in which we give traffic lights. I think it's the same for the way that if you, and we don't really wire plugs anymore, but the 3 different colored wires in a plug, I think also are designed that way so that even if you are colorblind, you can still wire a plug perfectly. There are ways we can make adjustments to the world, or ways we can create the world if we are there at the beginning of its creation, which means that we don't make it inaccessible to people. I think that is our job as artists and creatives, to try and include that as much as we can. And it doesn't mean we have to do it perfectly, but I do think we need to do it as much as we can. And that is why we're talking to these wonderful people on stage today, because I think they have done that as much as they can for particular projects. Laura and Ben, if I can come to you first, would you like to tell us about, was it Choosing Children? Take it away.
Yeah, so Choosing Children was a project in development for years, many, many years, but accessibility was always at the forefront. It was something that it was decided right at the beginning of the project, it's fair to say. I think I did come on a little bit later, but as soon as I was involved, it was definitely something that the organisation is very passionate about, making sure that, you know, having this idea that you could make a theatre show accessible to every single audience member. It's quite innovative as well, so yeah, it was a long time in the making, but it actually toured last year around the Midlands, which is where we're based. We did 5 venues. What else is there to say? It was quite intimate. It's an intimate performance because of the financial constraint. So obviously everything costs a bit more money when you have to put, when you want to put accessibility into it. So we were very lucky to be funded by Arts Council. And I think that was one of the strengths for the Arts Council application as well, was the accessibility that was the thought process going into the application. I don't know if you want to add anything.
All good. And Tom, what is the project you are working on, as much as you can say about it?
How much I can reveal? Well, like, I can answer what the topic is, can't I? Yeah. DaDaFest has revealed that, yeah. So this year's topic is rage. So looking at protest and rage, I was like, yes, I will sign your contract and do this. It sounds great fun. But yeah, so that's something to play about with as well. We were kind of having this discussion beforehand, talking about accessibility. So this is going to be an alternative reality game / ARG, BLT. Anyway, but yeah, this ARG, if you ever Google an ARG, it's a multimedia network narrative, which are all words we understand independently, but seems a bit odd stuck together. But what I think important about that is the idea of a network and the socialization of it. So with this, there's going to be an in-person strand that's going to run over 3 days and an online strand. So from an accessibility point of view, actually being able to get to places that shouldn't affect you, you'll have your own sort of quest line. But it also means that if you come up against a puzzle or something that you can't seem to solve, you will have that group of people who are playing with you to help solve it as well. So I think that's a big thing as well, is that like the social model is incredibly important, but also it's understanding, like, you know, like if I'm in an escape room, so to speak, and the puzzle's all to do with a load of reading, I'm going to give that to you over me because, you know, you're better at reading. And I think, yeah, you don't have to, it's not necessarily dissuading certain puzzle styles, especially when it comes to more AIG stuff, but it's thinking about if you can implement the community, then when it comes up to obstacles, which hopefully are narrative obstacles rather than accessibility ones, then you feel like you've got that to bounce back. And I mean, that's more of like an important thing in general, right? If you think about any issues people had, if you've got a good network of people to help you overcome that. So trying to forge that, which is why rage is great, right? We can all use that as a bonding thing, but hopefully use that to make something slightly more transgressible.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point that you bring up across. A lot of times when we first start thinking of access, we are worried that it means that we have to make the one thing we're doing completely accessible to as many people as possible, and that can feel like a daunting task or something that isn't going to fit within whatever resources, time, money, whatever that may be, the skill set or the want of the people that you're collaborating with or the people who are funding you or whatever. But with an ARG, because it's so branching, even if there is a task or a puzzle which someone might not be able to solve, that isn't a block. It's not a single linear narrative where if they can't get through this part, they can't progress. There are multiple equivalent experiences, and that means that even if someone can't do one thing, even if for whatever reason that has been designed in a way that makes it not completely accessible, enough of it is designed that for everybody, hopefully there is a path through the experience which, like we said, has an equivalent amount of story or artistic merit or aesthetic, or whatever it is that the thing you're trying to achieve with the work is.
Also, I think like the social model is a really important model, but it creates that sort of like utilitarianism in a sense, which is fine to think about the most people that you can help. But also it's like if you've got a VIP experience as part of your immersive show, that means that people who have money get a different experience. So if you can think, which is, you know, a different branching narrative, so to speak. So it's thinking of that too. So there'll be like, I've done other work where it's kind of audio files. So it'll ask you to like put your hands down on the table on the count of 3, and then like as you do that, a piano note plays with the audio, right? So it's playing with that sort of liveness. So I've been thinking I always have a little moment like that if it's an audio-based work. But obviously this is DaDa is deaf and disability access. So I've been playing with ways of like a person could click their fingers, but it's something visual, right? So actually then if you can hear, you still get a little moment, but actually that might spark something far greater with someone who has hearing issues, because essentially it's the same trick if you want to see it as a immersive trick, but it's been reworked to think of you, and hopefully that allows you to get something else out of it.
Yeah, I think with it there's this idea of what is the why behind what you want to achieve? Is it that you want somebody to have this unifying experience with everyone in attendance, in which case, okay, well, we know our audience, and maybe with DaDa we have a certain privilege where we know that a lot of our audience identify as disabled, deaf, or neurodivergent, and we know that there is, it is, for lack of a better phrase, for us, it is definitely worth making our experience accessible, because we know we have that audience, and we know that we need to and must cater for them. So finding that why of, well, why do we want everyone to kind of click at the same time? Is it because we want them all to enjoy a kind of a unifying experience together? Do we want it to be a thing that triggers something in the, like a musical note, like you said? I think we're talking a lot about access, but I think it would be good just to kind of hear from us what access we did plan into our piece. So Ben, Laura, in Choosing Children, what access was included in the show?
Okay, yeah. So basically we tried to integrate different levels of access into it. So we had British Sign Language, audio description and captioning. And that sounds, like a lot all in one, but we wanted every performance to be able to be seen. So basically you could see it. You could have audio description at any performance, you could have caption at any performance. So basically we try to just concentrate on those forms of access. Obviously there's like, access is massive, right? So it's like, that's just a particular thing that we dealt with. Like, we obviously did like, when we're doing, what venues do we choose to go to? Like, are they accessible? So there's different layers, but in terms of performance, we really concentrated on those 3 areas. And we had, try and like lay a bit of the complication in this, we had a live actor and also lots of technical things and interaction going on at the same time, so we couldn't really have, you would have queuing times and sort of like things that would make those sort of access really complicated. Plus, we never had any live interpreters in the room, so everything had to be like really tightly scripted. So in terms of scripture, it's all pre-recorded. So all the captioning, all the BSL, audio description is all pre-recorded, and it has to fit exactly every single time over, I don't know how many performances we did, but it had to be like incredibly tight to make it would work each time.
Okay, and I'm sure some people, I see a hand up. Yes.
Audiences are incredibly important, there's no doubt about it. But I'm also trying to investigate how support can be given to performers being able to take part in these experiences, and how we can make making work accessible to when people audition or when we're looking for artists. What can be put in place within the company so that you can work with neurodiverse, disabled and socioeconomically challenged performers and creatives?
That's an excellent question. I'll also say that, yeah, if anyone wants to answer this for themselves as well, adding more accessibility for your cast, your crews, your staff, it doesn't need to be for people just because they're disabled or deaf or neurodivergent. It can be for everybody, like you said, for social economic reasons, or it could be because they have families and they have childcare responsibilities, or they have other caring responsibilities. It's just figuring out, you don't have to look at it as a disability thing. There are organizations I work with, at DaDa, for example, all of the staff, regardless of how they identify, write out like a rider with their access needs in it and requirements. In mine, I talk about my stammer, I talk about my LLI, but other people who don't identify as disabled talk about their childcare needs and the fact that that means, or their need to work from home for certain things because of childcare, or their availabilities because of that, or absolutely not being able to work weekends unless it's pre-agreed and things. So I think that's something that you can build into the way that you work with your stuff, and I think an access rider is a good place to start with that, because then you have all the information that people want to tell you. I actually have 2 access riders. I do one before interviews, if I'm interviewing for a new thing, and then I have a second one for after interviews, which has more specific information that I don't necessarily trust people to not take into account in a discriminatory way while I'm interviewing. So feel free to have as many as you want for different options as well. That's absolutely a thing that you can do. And if you go on to the Unlimited website, there's an article written by Alexandrina Helmsley, which talks you through how to write an access rider, and as well has sample access riders if you don't want to start with a blank page and don't know what you're talking about. Also, if you come up to me afterwards, I can send you my access rider, and you can just base it off that, because mine's based off their template, so it'll be the same thing. Hand up, yes.
There's also a thing about, people who just had a bad day. I think it's a complexity, isn't it? Because if you're asking people to make declarations in an access rider, that's a thing, and it's really important. But there's also the people who just had a terrible day, and they're going to the theatre, and they want to leave in the middle of Act 1 because they feel like hell. And theatre doesn't allow it without the imposition of shame. So there's all of those things as well, that if you build access and inclusivity into your work so that shame isn't present, for example, then people can just go, and they don't need to tell you why, because they might not know until in the moment. And, we all have those needs as well.
Yeah, 100%. There's a reason I started this talk saying you can all come and go as you please. And it's why I also wanted to have something like this at an Immersive Experience Network event. We're in a really fortunate position where it's not a new art form, but we are starting to. It's much newer than theatre. Theatre has hundreds of years of etiquette and tradition and ableism built into it.
Years of doing it wrong. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Hundreds of years of doing it wrong. And if we're at the forefront and at the start of trying to establish what immersive is going to be moving forwards, we need to build access into it now, at the beginning, into our practice, into what we demand as audiences, into the ways in which we work and ask people of that. Because otherwise, it will be all crunched, it will be limited resources, it will be pinched. If you have a bad day, you might not be able to afford to have bad days, and I don't think that's right. And we should be able to not have to be perfect all of the time. Now, economics and capitalism, many, many other things feeding into this, but I think we can be aware of those from the get-go and not hope that the thing we're making is going to go perfectly. We can raise that extra bit more money if we need to, or we can come up with a creative way of not needing that extra money. We can come up with a creative solution. That's why we're all here. That's what we're all great at being, is being creative. And if not, we know people who are. We can work with people to kind of come up with the best ways to overcome the problems that we're facing for every element of a production. Like, if we make things more accessible, it benefits the whole production in every way. It benefits every member of staff, not just the disabled, deaf, or neurodivergent identifying ones. It benefits all of your audience. It benefits everyone in the get-go if we have a more accessible practice. If anyone else wants to...
No, I was just going to say, you answered the question, which is what you're going to ask, but it's essentially, yeah, I guess it's, to be as crass as possible, it's basically using professionalism as a shield to be a dick, essentially, right? Because it's like, oh, I've got this brand new script and you can't see it until you're in the room. And I'm like, well, I can't sight read, so I'm a good actor, but I'm going to look crap. Like you've done a project and you made people sign like NDRs so you could talk about it because you were under whatever. So I signed it, and then it meant that we could have a like phone call discussion. And then you could go, this is it, and now actually these are the questions we're going to ask you, and then we'll do the official interview like in 2 weeks. Like all you're doing is then just getting good people who can sight read. Or you're getting good people who can pass. I mean, even if you just look at it from like a job interview, same thing. If you don't know the questions till you're in the room, you're basically just getting good people who can improvise questions, but probably just not even, if you're looking for someone who's a good improviser, they're not going to be good in a job interview situation. So yeah, but that's exactly what you're saying, is that theatre had social contracts for years and years, and what's exciting about Immersive is like, it's new Hollywood. We can decide these protocols.
Yeah. And that both is a blessing and a curse.
For sure.
It means we can decide to do it or not do it. Something that I'd be really interested in hearing from our panelists is, because it feels like, because I know, Tom, you're also considering, have already kind of vowed to include audio description, captioning, and British Sign Language into your online experience, but obviously you did it in an in-person experience, so I'm wondering if there are any kind of differences in the way of approaching those very two different ways of making work within the immersive fields. I know that you did it in a pre-recorded and synchronized way. What were the kind of, why was the choice made to do that, and what were the benefits, and what were, if you were going to do it again, what would you improve upon?
I'll go for this one. So I'd probably start by saying, like, what doesn't work, right? Because essentially I'm saying that in the performance, we're going to caption this, we're going to have audio description, and we're going to have BSL. But what happens is that you've got like a whole user journey, right? If you think about people when they book their tickets all the way through. So if we're designing accessible experiences, you kind of, unless you can control every element of that from the first time someone goes onto that booking website or sees the advert all the way to the end, you've got to work in partner with a lot of different people. And a lot of the time you'll find that venues struggle to do as much access as you want, but you have to try and make it work. So everything we could control in terms of the performance, what we brought in, how we made the actors, how the actors performed, our technology that we used, we could control. So that said, right, as soon as you get into the venue and you wanted to be using a BSL interpreter, probably from the first time you interact with that theatre until you get actually into your seat, not necessarily going to get someone who does British Sign Language. Occasionally me, who's awful, but can. But that's very rare that I'm going to be actually in a venue when the show's around. So I think, you think there's certain bits we can control as creators, and we have to try and work on making those better. And the rest, we've just got to accept that we can only do certain bits which are advocating for what we think should happen, and we've got to try and push in the right direction, even if that means that, I've done a show which I say is accessible, but I know isn't accessible, and I could probably tell you all the reasons why it isn't accessible, but not, like, it will take too long to do it right now. But we are trying to make it work, and I think the key is, like, loads of bits fail, but we are trying to make it as accessible better, and we know it's way more accessible than other things. It comes with its challenges. Anything where you say live is, like, incredibly difficult, but technology is evolving. I think we've kind of got to evolve like with that technology, but it really comes down to our ethos. Like, do you want to make it accessible? Who do you want to come and see it? And are you happy with some people not being able to see it? And I think if you're comfortable, like, knowing that you've made a piece of work, knowing that you're excluding certain people from it, and I think, you know, that's fine. That's better than just purely deciding that, you know, out of ignorance, you don't want to try and include someone. Is at least a step forward to some conscious thought about access.
No, absolutely. I think it's...
We have a question.
There's lots of... Oh, we have several questions. Let's do, yes, that one, and then we'll come to you after.
Hi there. I wanted to share an experience, but also ask you a question off the back of it. I'm going to be the annoying person at the Q&A that just wants to tell you their own thing. But so I run a small festival with a kind of variety of fringe, grassroots, interactive performances, events, activities, installations. And it's come off the back of a very tight-knit community. It's a real community event. There's been a few years of community building that's gone into it, to the point where, you know, I kind of know a lot of the participants by name. And I made a discovery when I put the tickets on sale that somebody who I was absolutely expecting to come, complete shoo-in, massive supporter of the other endeavours that my organisation's been involved in, told me that they could not book a ticket because for neurodiversity reasons, they couldn't go to something that had a varied programme of events like I did without having some idea of the type of interactivity involved in each, because there was a certain amount of things that they were worried about, overwhelmed, sensory issues, and it was really important for them. And you know, I think there are the kind of new conventions that we build in Immersive, and one is, everyone loves the element of surprise, and secrecy and excitement and mystery. So I guess there are two things. So one is, you know, what new immersive conventions should we be thinking about? But secondly, how do we build that dialogue in a situation where where you don't know everybody by name? You know, I was fortunate in that position where the ticket holder felt comfortable enough to reach out to me personally and explain why they weren't buying a ticket. And then I could take steps against the wishes of some performers to provide somewhere a more structured breakdown of the types of interactivity involved. So, but for people who aren't in that position, how do you build that dialogue with people for things that you've not even thought of?
We have a hand up in the audience. Is that in response or an answer to... Yeah. No, go ahead.
So I have a process of making participatory theatre. I hate that phrase. Where we just offer everything. We just offer everything. If you want to know the story, you can know the story up front. If you want to be talked through everything that's going to happen on the day, you can have that. You'll spoil the surprise is a really dangerous phrase for many people because we absorb it. We have absorbed from theatre, unfortunately, many things like the show must go on and all of those things which are hideously dangerous. And we just assume that they're true and that they must be part of our experience. So we just make everything available, and we also say, you can call us here if we haven't made your thing available. But to prioritize open channels of communication is less important than to put all of the information out there as much as you can to begin with. So if we're not hiding anything, and we also say, you can come into rehearsals with us, you can join our production meetings, you can, whatever you need to engage, whenever you want to engage, for however long you want to engage, you can do that. And if money's an object for you, then don't worry, then just come. And if it's only 5 minutes at 4:00 when we're just stopping for tea, come anyway. Just making an open invitation is not a difficult thing. But we think it is because we have all these, it must be that, a story, you must see the whole story. You must see it from beginning to middle to end. You must engage in the story when you come, otherwise you're not coming to see it. Or you must play the game, otherwise you're not. These are all irrelevant rules that people have led us to believe are important, and they're really not. If you want to come and have cake with me, do that. It doesn't have to have anything to do with what we're making.
100%. It's a thing that we feel is an important or precious element, but that can only ever be an opinion, and it will be held by a minority of people. We like to think that when someone turns up to our experience, they are as locked in as we would be, and that they are paying attention to the whole thing, and at the end they have gotten out of it exactly what we intended, and that is almost always not the case. And people will have their attention fade in and out. And if you need someone to pay perfect attention to your experience for them to get everything you want out of it, then you haven't made an accessible experience. And if your experience hinges on a plot twist you have to put in the trigger warnings, you haven't made an accessible experience. And if you don't want to provide a sound journey so people can see where the loud noises are, or you don't want to have a more detailed plot breakdown, an email people can email to ask you to just check things. Hey, I've seen that the show poster has balloons. Are there going to be balloons on stage? I don't want them to pop. You know, these are things people have asked me. And
literally picked my thing. You literally
really?
My thing is balloons.
Right, okay. Yeah, see, and I know someone else. It's more common than people realize, and it's why we need it's radical flexibility, radical transparency, as was just been perfectly kind of talked about. We have another, in red, your hand was up earlier, but we have a hand up in white behind if that's in response, so.
I like this system where you all just answer your own questions and we take credit.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, no,
that's what I was going to say, but slightly smarter. Remember that.
Mine's kind of in response now, so I've forgotten my original question, but my brain's buzzy with these ones now, so can I respond?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Do it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to say that we often also use a stepped approach, so we, especially with audiences who might be housebound for whatever reason, or not comfortable going into certain spaces, maybe theatre spaces, any kind of spaces, so we'll arrange to meet in a space where they feel safe and chat about the show, bring photos. Sometimes the cast can come along and meet them in character and out of character. And if not, we'll do videos so that, again, it might be the cast introducing themselves and then saying, and I'm going to be, and now I am, and then being in character, doing videos of the journey to the theatre, through the theatre, or whatever space you're in, outdoor, to the forest, wherever you are. And videos of what to expect, the space once you get inside it or near it, and do like a really stepped approach. But we also do lighter, I've got lighter and brighter stuck in my head. That's not what it's called, but we do different versions for sensory seekers or light and bright. No, that's the same thing again. Anyway, we do different versions so people can kind of choose off a menu whether you want very little sensory input in the space, or whether you want a huge amount of sensory input in the space. So there's that's another way that we do that. But also, just in response to earlier about looking after your team, your cast, your crew, your creatives, I was going to mention, just in case people don't know, and you might want to expand on this, but access support workers and, like gold dust, beautiful, beautiful things. And the fact that Arts Council, if you're applying to Arts Council, will fund you to even apply. So they will pay for an access support workers to help you apply for funding, but also access to work, in case people aren't aware of that, whether that's for yourself as you're creating or for the people that you're working with to maybe be able to support them to do that themselves.
There's an awful lot. And the Arts Council one's great because a lot of people don't know that if you're making an Arts Council bid, you can get your access support worker paid by the Arts Council, regardless of whether your bid is successful or not.
You need to get them first, because I once did it, got someone to help me do it, and then sent off the access thing, and they went, great, we shall now do that, and then once you've got your access support worker, you can now apply. And I was like, I've done it backwards. But that's a really good point as well. I mean, because we're talking specifically about Immersive, here today, but there might be people with access requirements who still want to be playful. Like, yes, brilliant and extreme of going, we will break immersion, come, as you said, come have cake. That's beauty. But there's also the side which is like, oh, I want to keep that, kayfabe, they call it in wrestling, where it's like, I am El Machador no matter what. And that's an extreme. But also some people might be like, I'm kind of happy to speak to him in character, but I still need a guide around the space. So actually having more playful, they're in character, but they're still going, a bangs around the corner is a really lovely way of doing that, for sure.
Yeah, there was a project we were working on at Dada, partnered with the Space, where we were looking at augmented reality sign language interpretation and different use cases for different environments, theatre, promenade performances, and we partnered with my theatre company outside of Dada, Chronic Insanity, to do a production called All the King's Men, which was a sort of an ARG 5 chapters of like online, different interactive things with a different medium. So one was an interactive text, and the next was a sort of interactive video. One of the ones we did was an audio sort of experience, and it was like someone giving you instructions in a sort of an espionage spycraft kind of way. You had to go out of your house and act normal and then hide a little message under a rock and then come back into your house and then carry on with the rest of the experience. And we wanted to make that, or that's purely audio, so we wanted to interpret that and get that sign language interpreted. So what we could have done is gone, okay, well, let's just have the audio interpreted and get it on a screen and then let them watch it, but then they don't get to do that playfulness. So instead we built an app so that you could look through your phone and kind of use it like a lens to see the world through, and then we could superimpose green screen sign language interpretation synced up with the audio onto it. So not only could you now move and promenade while looking at your phone, you could do so without not being aware of the world around you, and also with the same sort of like, try not to pay attention to me, just pretend that you're looking at your phone, elements that were in the original thing. So we kept that playfulness in the interpretation. So just because something was accessible didn't mean it had to be any less immersive, any less giving the audience a role to play. Yeah. So yes, what share?
Thank you so much to everyone for everything that's been discussed. I think all of us kind of can really resonate on so many levels. And also just thanks for everybody for all the work that they're clearly doing, because it's quite tough, I think, especially in the like public subsidised sector. You know, there's a lot going on right now and not many resources. So it's good to find out these kind of little hacks and things. But yeah, I'd love to just kind of get anybody's input and advice on something that like I've been experiencing, because, and it's really around this stuff to do with like capacity issues, infrastructure issues, and then also like if there's neurodivergence on like across multiple teams, so both within the artistic team and then also with maybe like any contractors you're bringing in, photographers, etc., and then also on the venue side. But also this issue of where, like, I'm pretty sure I've experienced where I've worked on a project as a producer and, like, where I'm sure there is neurodivergence with certain people across these different teams, but, like, nobody is being transparent about it. So therefore, we're just literally in the theatre doing the tech rehearsal. We've never worked with this photographer before, but, like, they've been recommended through a trusted photographer we have worked with before. And then it just, I mean, goes so terribly wrong because, like, all the artists are, bless them, trying their best on stage under pressure to tech the show, you know, think we've got tech problems, again, through nobody's fault, but just because tech sometimes fails us. And then so they're already kind of under a lot of pressure there, but we've got to get these production shots because press night's coming up. So the photographer, bless him, has also come in trying his best. And then I'm there and I'm looking at the whole scene, you know, bird's eye view, like producers, curators, etc. do. And I can see everything sort of unfolding and everybody's getting so frustrated. But like, and because I'm quite sure, like, because, you know, I've had friends that are going through diagnoses, things like that. I'm quite sure that this photographer is autistic. And that's why, like, even though I've tried to a couple of times subtly say to him, oh, thank you so much, you know, oh, for this. But actually, if you have any questions, perhaps next time, could you not ask the cast or the director, because they're a bit stressed at the moment. Could you maybe just ask me instead, and I'll try my best. And if I can't, I'll go and ask the director. But then he'll still 10 minutes later to go and ask the cast. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, like, and then basically ended up being a situation where everybody just blew up and got so frustrated.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I just, do you have any advice in these situations?
It can always be difficult when there appears to be like a clash of access, when in order to make something accessible for one person, it looks like you can't see a way forward without limiting the access of somebody else. We don't live in a perfect world, and I'm aware of lots of situations. It happens frequently where that's the case. I think, unfortunately, one of the best things you can do is planning and stuff. But if this person, you know, it sounds like there are forces beyond your control. There are maybe wider stigmas. There are maybe a lack of education and understanding about, so people can't know about themselves. These aren't things that you can solve as a producer. You have to be able to work within the kind of cracks and the seams that kind of these create. I wonder if anyone on stage has any kind of experience with that sort of, when it comes to crunch time and you have stress and that then kind of impacting on either very kind of like accessibility or kind of complicated technical setups like Laura and Ben, like you've had. If anyone wants to say anything about that.
I was just going to say, well done for surviving all that. We've all got one of those stories, I think, for sure. Yeah, I guess it comes down to the thing. We were talking about this earlier before, and we just keep quoting us in. You remember that discussion where we said all the cool stuff before? No? But we were talking about, it was a certain festival, and I was doing an immersive show, and they're like, so it needs to be captioned, it needs to be X, it needs to be Y. And I was like, oh, I understand. It's really great you're making these steps, but I understand that you've just sent this stock email out to every show, and that makes sense for traditional shows. We have no idea what our show is, and that doesn't work for X, Y, and Z. And obviously we will sort that. We want to be accessible, but actually and that's the issue of the cookie cutterness of it, is it's like not every deaf person is the same. Every dyslexic person is the same. So it comes down to individual differences as well. And sometimes you are fighting a losing battle, but as long as you're aware you're fighting, it's important. Like I remember it was something on like social media, but it was someone who was like, if I'm autistic, so if I'm overstimulated, leave me in the corner, don't touch me, blah. And this was perfectly timed with someone underneath who went, I have anxiety, so if you see me sad, hug me, hold it. And it was literally the polar opposite bullet point, using the same like meme structure. And I was like, well, that's it, because you can't win, can you? And especially when you're like directing or in a producer role or whatever, it is just spinning plates. It's like, we were talking about this earlier about like the reliability of actors. It's like, oh, this person's really good, but they won't, but they're always 20 minutes late. But so, oh, well, this person freaks out if we don't start at 10 o'clock. So, you know, it's. But yeah, so I guess it does come down to, I guess in a way, individuality as well. There's having these I'm using cookie cutters as if it's a bad thing, but having these tool sets here, but also being aware that it's like you as an individual, as a breathing human being, no matter what ailments / diversity you have, work this way. That's great. I will try and accommodate that. But Dave over here works completely differently. So,
yeah, no, like hand up, just behind you.
Not at all.
Absolutely, not at all.
Do you just want a chair? Should we just save some time?
So because I'm autistic and I have ADHD and I can't work in theatre because I can't sit still or keep quiet. And I make theatre, so that's ridiculous. So I had to develop a form of theatre where I could do knitting, is essentially what I've done. And my perception of the problem that we often face is that we have a linear goal that we are trying to collectively follow. And so I use a process, I have further developed a process called open space technology, which was realized by a guy called Harrison Owen, who spent a year trying to organize a traditional conference. And at the conference, he realized that the only really useful work was being done in the coffee break, which was the one thing he had not designed. And so he understood what constitutes a coffee break, and it's a very Zen process. And because I'm a storyteller, I moved away from Joseph Campbell and Arrow narratives, where the hero goes on a journey and becomes a hero from being a fool. Not least because in much of Western storytelling, there are very male-oriented stories where you go fool and then you become hero. And the female ones are very much, you have a baby and then you become wrinkly and useless. So linear narratives are tricky anyway in many ways. And there's a variety of storytelling which is known as the carrier bag theory of fiction, which is an Ursula Le Guin theory. Le Guin, yeah. Where it addresses works of fiction like Pratchett's Discworld and Lord of the Rings and things that are much about story worlding and creating all possible stories contained in these bags. And the theory of it is that people say that the first human tool was an arrow or a spear or a sharp pointy thing. But actually, probably the first human thing that we invented as a tool was a container to help us gather more berries for the village or help us hold the baby or whatever, a container. So the origin of storytelling is round the fire, and it does take a week to tell a story. You don't just tell one version of the story and then go home. You tell many versions, and everybody contributes and can play a part, and the story changes over time, and you share food together, and the story is a container you get inside together. And I say this because all of our problems about it's going to be press night, that's a linear thing. We need certain photos, that's linear. And all the stress of the company who are trying to get the technical right, so they can do the first night. It's all linear work. And I understand that linear theatre has been made since the ancient Greeks, and I understand that I'm sitting here saying, and they got it wrong since then. And I'm not really saying that, but also I am saying that because it was a political tool. It was starting to be used as a tool for influencing the people. And we have kind of lost track of what it is to be inside the container that is a story and find ourselves within it. So we try and very badly make work. I am very clumsy about it, but I try and invite people into a container where the story is the last thing we think about, and the story is, in many ways, the least important thing. Because story is so powerful that it will take care of itself whether you invite it in and try and control it or not. So the first thing I try and do is bring us together in a place that feels comfortable enough for us to go through things that might be uncomfortable. And once we've achieved that, then we let the story in. And it's a completely ask-about way of doing it. And it's not necessarily successful, and many people tell me it's not theatre. But I never have an issue with photographers because I don't care. If that photographer comes in and can't take pictures, but they're a lovely person and they're there and that's nice, that's okay. That's okay. And that's part of the very Zen process that is open space technology. And it's about shifting your expectations, but it's then also about shifting the expectations of people who have paid to come and have an experience with you. And that's about money, and that's about maybe we don't charge them money. You know, there's all kinds of questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, to move away from linear is key.
I mean, I was going to say that's very like immersive as well. Like Entourage and Hod, Alex, the creative director for that, I interviewed him, and he said about how when you do like a traditional theatre, it's about your rehearsal is where you're messy and you're terrible, and then at the end you're perfect. And he was like, but I think the best immersive theatre is when people come in, it's feel like the first day of rehearsal, right? It's like you're in a new world, you're excited, you're, oh my God, and it's like, make your audience feel like it's the first day of your rehearsal. And I love that as an idea, for sure. And also, like, as you talk about story, Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club and other stuff, he talks about how there's kind of this lie that your story has to be this amazing story that's never been told before, right? But actually the best stories, and it's why I said I feel we've all had that day, is because it's stories that people go, oh my God, you've got that scar, let me show you this one, right? It's the I had a terrible first day at work story. Yeah. And then people go, you think that's terrible, and they one-up you. And that's the joy, right? Exactly. But you bond over that.
Yeah, and something that you were saying right at the end as well, I think is really important, is that idea of expectations when we're providing access. It's whether that is letting people know that we have that access so we can market it and we can actually get, if we've spent all this time and effort sometimes to get access in place, that we actually have people that can benefit from that in our audience, or whether it's just letting people know what to expect, whether that's from a trigger warning perspective or a sound journey where they can see where the loud noises are or whatever that is. I just want to, I think, Ben and Laura, what work did you do for choosing children from like an expectation perspective? Obviously, when you're building kind of new, and it's particularly like new forms of things, like recordings of sign language interpretation that people might not be expecting, could you talk a little bit about how you kind of either manage or prepare those expectations for your audiences?
During the shows, we did onboarding and offboarding, didn't we? So we did an onboarding before people went into the experience, and we definitely made people feel like it was a safe space and that they could walk out because from a subject point of view, which we've not really touched on, it was, it's quite a hard subject to listen to as well. So we wanted our audience to feel safe, and if they didn't, then there was definitely no judgment on leaving a show. And then we did offboarding as well, which was, really important to get audience feedback from all points, from a story point of view, but also from an accessible point of view. The show is about disability, so it opened up some really interesting conversations. We invited people to write on post-it notes, or we had like posters up and stuff where people could write their thoughts if they wanted to. So that during the shows we tried our best to make people feel safe and give feedback as well, because that was really interesting. Before we did a preview show with a selected audience as well, with people with lived experiences, because we felt That was really important to get feedback from people with lived experience that we don't have. And actually, there were some changes made to the show based on that feedback, wasn't there? So we probably could have done more work in the build-up before production. Looking back, I mean, going back to the cast and crew, sort of, like from a character point of view, we didn't have gender, we didn't have age, like anyway, it made it harder because we had like thousands of applications because we weren't, you know, there had to be 18 plus. That was the only sort of thing from a cast point of view. But you know, we did recruit actors with disabilities. We had a deaf actor. We had other actors with various different disabilities. So, you know, we made it as open as we could from a casting, from a crew point of view. We worked with a lot of freelancers. But yeah, I think even just today, listening to you guys, there's like things I've been like, not thought of that. And that's stuff that you know, this is why this is such an interesting conversation because, and you know, hopefully we'll talk to people later. You just want to make it the best you can for everybody that you're trying to reach. So thank you for your openness as well, because actually there's things you've been talking about, like we need to incorporate that into our next project, which we're hoping to be even better in terms of accessibility.
Yeah, I was just going to jump on that. Like, I think that's you know, we try and incorporate these things, but also I should say, just from the other side, because I think like you have this kind of like, is it like an angel effect, or we're trying to like make it as accessible as possible, but like, I'm just going to say now that I made artistic decisions that were bad for access, like all the way through, and I own those, and we'll attest to you know, how often after the show that we had some long conversations about why we made artistic decisions. But I'm comfortable because I make loads of mistakes, and I'm happy to make mistakes. Sometimes I make decisions which are for artistic reasons, which are, as you know, someone who you know, is audio-visual. I make audio-visual decisions all the time because that's why I lead. But I'm happy to admit that I'm wrong quite a lot of the time, which I guess is, you know, gives me some saving graces. Like, but the reason why is that, you know, I can't get everything right, but I've got to try to do certain things. And I know that I want to try and make it as accessible as possible, but we're only, you know, we will make certain decisions to a certain point, and at that, I know that we won't change the show to make it more accessible because I'm kind of reached a point where I'm happy with it artistically. Now that means it's a lesser show for some people, right? I'm making those decisions all the time. When I feel guilty about it is when I've kind of, you know, I wasn't even aware of the decisions that I've made and I haven't consulted properly. So for instance, like when I've made some, you know, I just haven't had the people in the room which have said, oh, this thing could have been done better, and I haven't been able to change it later. That's when I feel bad. I would want to try and change as much as possible as I can, but there is a point where you've just got to say, this is this show, and this is what it's going to be. And then, you know, at the end of that, you have to accept that some people it won't be accessible for, or it won't be a good a show. Like, is this as good, like Choosing Children, is it as good in audio description as it is visually? Probably not, right? It's just, there's too much text, there's like, you know, there are just artistic decisions you make as you go through, but you learn that, and then hopefully on our next one, it'll be better. And trying to get people in that room early on is just so much better. But the thing is, if you're going to talk like about a progressive talk about access, which is where hopefully everyone is in the room, right? You want to start with where do you want the experience to be and how high quality do you want it to be? Because you've got to set the expectation, like you say, not necessarily let's just make it accessible, because that isn't good enough. Like, I can put captions on something, but it can still be crap, right? It's just like, I don't want to just make it, you know, accessible for this group of people. I've really got to be saying, like, who is my audience and how do I want them to experience it? And if I can't achieve that, I just have to be clear. Like, you know, like say we have this conflicting access. So sometimes you can't get the two things right, like BSL and audio description. Sometimes they're they don't want to work together in a best experience, right? So, and also, am I the best person to do it? So, not always, right? So it's like I have to have people in the room with me that are going to add this, and also am I going to own it if I get it wrong? And you know, I'm happy to do that in a lot of cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with starting out, realizing that you've made mistakes, trying to be more accessible next time. And if you've never had to balance the like artistic quality, whatever that may be, as well as making it accessible, you're going to get it wrong. The first time you do it, it's going to not work properly or as good as you want it, or you'll sacrifice quality, or you'll sacrifice accessibility. The next time you do it, you just have to be a little bit better. And the time after that, a little bit better. And eventually, it'll be so ingrained in your practice, you'll have worked with consultants and picked stuff up, and then you'll just be able to build that in. You'll start knowing things. You'll start working with frequent collaborators and knowing how they want to work, and then picking people that are a team that can work well together, or with enough flexibility that you can then work with new people and accommodate whatever requirements they might need. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I just wanted to end with some, there's something I saw. I think there is a new, the Arts Council's doing loads of like good pro access stuff. And there was a very succinct rundown I saw of if you're going to start thinking about access, what are the 4 places you might want to really like drill in on it? And I'm aware there will be some people in the audience who are kind of, will hear everything we're saying and will sort of go, that's all great, in a perfect world, sure, but what can I actually do? What if I am in reality, and in my reality I have limited budgets and limited time, how can I actually make stuff more accessible? Because I've already developed my practice, and I don't know if I have the time and energy to change it. And I would say that I think that you do, but slowly and surely, like we were just saying, and some of the ways you can start are with these 4 points. 1, improving the built environment in and around venues, including removing physical obstacles and providing better physical access. Now, if you don't own a venue, this means finding venues to work with who don't physically inhibit people from being able to enter their premises, particularly in immersive, found spaces for site-specific work. 2, making digital communication with disabled audiences more accessible, usable, and inclusive. It takes an extra 10 minutes to put alt text on your images on social media, and then they can be read out by screen readers. You can now, I don't always advocate for using ChatGPT, but if you put a piece of text in it and say, rewrite this at a certain reading age, like a 10-year-old reading age, it'll do it. And it'll do it quickly if time is of the essence for you for whatever reason. There's no point, like we sort of said earlier, if you're trying to make your show accessible, but the venue's not accessible, then the show isn't accessible. If your marketing isn't accessible, then your show isn't accessible. Building in access to commissions, events, and programming at the ideas, budgeting, and development stages, really considering access right from the get-go, actually from the first idea, maybe even using it to pick which idea you do or not, because you can make that accessible now, and you're going to need to take a couple of years to figure out how to make that one accessible. There's plenty of time. It's not a race. We can do the other idea later once we are more confident we can do it properly. And by properly, I mean accessibly. And then finding in working with customer services so that venues and events give a warm welcome to everybody. Back in early 2020, I did a show at Vault Festival, which was called Glitch. It was a show about autism and small towns and video games, and we were working with an autistic writer and performer, and we wanted to have autistic audiences be able to come into the venue. But we were in Vault Festival, so we were in a dark, underground, confined space with trains going over it, with dark passages and then blinding neon. So we worked really hard to try and figure out a new queuing system to enter the venue, to have the venue at the front of the complex so people didn't have to queue throughout the whole thing. We chatted to the venue, and they were really accommodating, as much as they could be, given that we were one show out of 30 or 40 or 50. And we managed to make it work. And then we had earplugs and we had dark glasses if people hadn't brought their own. We had a queue in the show to put the ear defenders on at the moment. It's not impossible, but I do recognize you need a bit of time and a bit of space to try and figure it out. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And we worry about not doing it properly. If we really value the high quality of the execution of an idea, which as artists, a lot of us do, we worry the access won't be up there. But I do think that a little bit, or attempting something, as long as people know what to expect, is better than not doing it at all. Making it a bit more accessible if you can't make it perfectly accessible. Does anyone else have any other final words?
I was just going to kind of end with that playfulness. So, like, I mean, Greer Theatre, they're the ones who get all the money and can do cool stuff. But they did Reasons to be Cheerful. The guy in the punk jacket loves Ian Jury. Who'd have thought? But they had this one character, and they were like, he does a pirate. It was set in a pub, and he's doing a pirate radio station, and it was just a silly one-off like joke to everyone else. But what that person was actually doing was audio describing it. So you gave it an in-world reason, but they were getting another show. And because the audio describer was a character who was a bit of an old geezer, they were getting audio described from the character describing the, you know what I mean? You're adding layers on, and they're getting a whole different track that's entirely different. So they don't have to be separate. It can be part of your creative playfulness.
Any final sentence, Laura, Ben, anything else? If not, we all...
Well, we've got another talk in a little while where you could hear way more in-depth choosing children information about how we did it, why we did it, the challenges and everything else. So love you to stay around if you can. We won't be too offended if you go. But yeah, I think just echoing what you said, thinking of it right at the beginning, you know, before you even apply for the budget, like put it in your budget, because, you know, it does make things more expensive, but it's not, you know, it's important, so think about it right at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm also where lots of people had hands up, we didn't get to questions. I'm very happy to continue this discussion in another area of the building once this talk is over, and this talk is now over. Thank you all for coming, everybody. And thank you for our wonderful panel as well. Thank you.
Thank you.